All right, so we're going to add to our understanding of graphical displays by adding what we like to consider the big guys, the popular ones. So we're going to start with a word called classes. And what a class is, let me kind of go down and look at some data here. Here's some raw data. And we're going to take a look at the types of numbers that show up. And it looks like the smallest is 0 and the largest is 5. That's a manageable type. And so in this case, our class is going to be each number, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Let me scroll down to some other numbers, some more data here. So here we have some larger numbers that we're going to go through and analyze in a moment. And as you can see, not so easy to separate the two. So what we'd want to do then is we want to think about, well, what's the highest and lowest that we can find, and then how many interval widths do we want to have inside of our data. And we'll get to this one in a minute, but I just want to show you there's differences in how you would look at the different types of data. So let me go back up to here. So we'll do this one first. So what we need to do is we need to tally, find frequency and relative frequency and all that fun stuff of this particular data. And I'm going to try a new method here as far as how to show this. So kind of go down here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to count how often does certain numbers show up. So I want 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I want to look at the tally and the frequency. Sorry, it looks like a G. I want it to look like a Q. And the relative frequency of all of these numbers. And so with 0, I just go in and count how often it shows up. So it shows up 1, 2, 3, 4. Double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I'll let you go in and calculate the tallies of all the other numbers going 1 to 5, and then we'll talk about relative frequencies. Okay, so hopefully you get the same number as I did, and if we add up the total, we should get that there are 50 of them. And so I can go back in and calculate relative frequency by setting up the fractions. And then I'm going to come in and get a decimal equivalency here in a moment. Okay, so I'm going to go type it in a calculator and come back with a decimal. Okay, so our new graphical display this time is a histogram. And a histogram is very similar to a bar graph. The real distinct difference is that the rectangles actually touch, whereas in a bar graph they don't. Histograms are used with numerical data, whereas bar graphs are used for categorical data. So that's another big difference. Okay, so what we're going to do then, let me get up my little drawing pad here, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so what I want to do then for a histogram is we're going to set it up like a bar graph to start off with 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. Now this time I want to look at the heights. And this is very similar to bar graph. It looks like the highest gets up to 22. So I'm going to count by 5. So 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. Now, one distinct difference between a histogram and a bar graph, rectangles touch, but there's also a numerical value for where we set the rectangles up. So if I look at 0, I've got a frequency of 4. So when I draw in that rectangle, okay, this border here and that border there actually went zero point 0.5 below and zero point 0.5 above the 0. So the rectangle goes from negative zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.5. The 1, which we have 13 of it, so let's draw that rectangle, of course touching. And that rectangle is centered above 1, but it goes from 0.5 to 1.5. Anything between that range is a value of 1. That's where that class idea comes in. Let's see, a 2, we got 22 and 7 next, so we'll make that up a 22, do that as a 7, 3, and then 1. Okay, so notice we want, it's centered around that number. Okay, now let me go back. This is a histogram. Let me do a frequency histogram, which is going to have the same setups at the bottom. The only real difference is going to be the heights going up. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, now when I go back up to the relative frequencies, I'm looking at the percentages, and it looks like I want to count by maybe 0.1. Looks like the highest frequency is up at 0.44. So we'll go 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, all the way up to 0.5 is what we'll have labeled. And then you just go back in and see 0.08 and 0.26. So I draw rectangles that have that similar height. Now it should look should be the same picture. 0.44 and 0.14. Sorry, I'm getting my arm on the drawing pad here. 0.06 and 0.02. Okay, so notice the histograms look very similar to each other. The only difference is the height scale that we're constructing these things with. Okay, so we're going to talk about classes for a moment, and then we're going to use that to look at more complicated histogram graphs. So when we look at a larger set of data, and instead of giving each particular data value its own image in the graph, we instead look at a range of values. Let me kind of show you sort of an example here. So let's say I've got several thousands of individuals, and I'm interested in just general age information. Rather than 25 gets a rectangle, 26 gets a rectangle, 27 gets a rectangle, instead of each number getting a rectangle, we're instead going to look at a grouping of ages. So I'll define, or will define, ages 25 to 34 in one rectangle, 35 to 44 in one rectangle, and so on. So these numbers, these are our classes, and the width of this interval, can I go back here? Let's see, classes are categories in which data is grouped. Data, we use this when there's large bits of data. Okay. The width of the interval, we're actually not going to look at the 25 and 34. We're going to look at the 25 to 35. Because if I'm 34.9, which class would I be in? I would be in the 25 to 34 range. So we're saying we don't jump categories until we hit 35. We don't jump again until we hit 45. So if I start at 25 and I end at 35, then my width would have to be 35 minus the 25, which is 10. So my class width would be 10 years instead of 34 minus 25, which is 9. So it's 10 instead of 9. Anyway, so look down when you're figuring out class width. Now, we're going to look at a little more complicated data. And the first thing we want to do is identify where in our number set is the largest and where is the smallest. And I'm just going to write this down off to the side here. Maybe write this down off to the side. Let's see. I believe 672 is the smallest, and we can find the biggest at looks like 738. So if I take a calculator and I subtract 738 minus 672, that gives us a range of about 66. Okay. So what I'm going to do before I go in and tally these is I'm going to set up my class widths, and we're going to go from. Alright, so we're going to start right about 670. So I'm going to insert a little table here, and I'm going to go class tally frequency and relative frequency, same that we've been doing. And we're going to start at 670, and we're going to go all the way up to 679, because that's not what makes the variance width. It's the next number up, so 680 to 689. I'm just organizing my data here as far as what I'll go in and look at. So 690 to 699. Kind of speed this up so you don't have to watch me do the whole thing. Okay, so once I've got my classes identified, I'm going to come in and go through all my data. So let's see, so 728 is in this one, so it gets a tally. Do this electronically here. 730 fits right there, so it gets a tally. So you can kind of see this takes a little while if you're doing it electronically, but by a hand it's not that bad. 726, we get another tally right there. Okay, so I'm going to speed this up and kind of let you go through the data and look for all the different numbers and which category it fits in, and then we'll go back to our chart here. Okay, so as we get caught up here, hopefully you came up with the same numbers as I did. There are a total of 45 of them. One, we were told there were 45, but you can double check if you add up the frequency that they should add up to 45. So I can type that in. Let's see, 2 out of 45, so I'll get that in a calculator in a second and get some decimals, and we'll go from there. Okay, so as we have, as you've worked out the various percentages, we can talk about doing a graph. So at the bottom, we would set up from 670 to 679. So we would go right in the midpoint of that, which is 675.